Zabu has amazing synergy with 4-cost cards. You're going to want to play a whole bunch of these cards in your deck. And today we're rating all of the 4-cost cards currently in Marvel Snap, how good they are in a Zabu deck. If you're not familiar, Zabu, just below me, has an ongoing ability of your 4-cost cards cost 2 less. So on turn 6, you're going to be able to play 3 of these, but there's also other synergies with things like Wave, Sarah, and Mystique, where you can play up to 6 of these cards on your final turn. So you're going to want to include a whole bunch, and we're going to be rating them from the very best to the very worst. We're going to start off with Rescue. Rescue is going to go into the popping off category. She is 9 stats for 4, which is really, really good. It's one of the best 4 drops you can get in terms of raw points. However, there is a big downside to Rescue, which is that her 9 points mean that she is in the range of Shang-Chi. Shang-Chi, of course, being one of the best cards that you can possibly play in Zabu decks, so he's going to be even more popular than normal. So because of Rescue being at 9 stats, I would actually advise against including Rescue in a lot of your Zabu decks early on, because so many people are going to be playing Zabu and therefore having Shang-Chi in their decks as well. We have Crossbones up next. Crossbones is 8 stats for 4, outside of the Shang-Chi range. I'm going to put Crossbones into popping off, surprisingly ahead of Rescue, for the reason I just mentioned, that it does get you out of Shang-Chi range. Of course, Crossbones, you can only play into locations that you're winning, and often with Zabu decks, if you're trying to hold on to all your cards until the last turn, Crossbones could get a little bit awkward. We have Jessica Jones next, 8 stats for 4. However, a pretty big downside to Jessica Jones is that you can't play her on turn 6, and if you play her on turn 5, she can be pretty awkward as well, because you don't want to just lock yourself out. So on turn 4, she's popping off, but honestly, I think she's a little bit awkward, so I'm going to put her into the decent category. When I've been building these Zabu decks and theory crafting, Jessica Jones ended up getting cut. She is, of course, a pull 1 card, so everyone has access to her. Don't be afraid to include her in your Zabu decks if you don't have a full collection, but I would imagine that even cards like Drax, you could make a strong argument to play over Jessica Jones. Absorbing Man up next. Now, Absorbing Man's a really interesting one. It's a pull 4 card, of course. I actually just purchased this today for 3,000 tokens, which tells you all you need to know. There's so many synergies of this card that I think it's just got to be in the Broken Mate category. You can combo it with Spider-Man on turn 5 to play Absorbing Man and Spider-Man and Absorbing Man to web up 2 out of 3 locations. That already is absolutely insane. And then just any big payoff card that you've got, you could double Shang-Chi, you could play double Rock Slide, all sorts going on with Absorbing Man. Wong is also a 4-drop, so there's some synergy there. However, currently Absorbing Man does not work with Wong. I'm going to assume that's a bug, but that gets even better if that does get fixed in the upcoming patch. Atuma up next. Atuma, another pull 4 card. I do have this one as well. I think I'm going to put Atuma into the has potential category. 10 stats for 4, you can't really go wrong. With Shuri, it's a really nice bit of synergy. However, you're going to be wanting to play cards like Zero and Armor with Atuma, which I very much doubt that you want to do. So I'm going to put it in has potential. You could also consume it with Dracula. Dracula being a 4-drop. That's why I'm putting it in has potential rather than meh. Up next you have Crystal. Crystal's a really interesting one because Crystal actually, one of the worst cards in Marvel Snap, but in this deck with Zabu, it has a lot of potential. But that's all I'm going to put it as potential because it's just 4 stats, which is not enough, and it's only giving you 3 cards in hand. If you're not familiar with Crystal, you are playing her, shuffling your hand into your deck, and drawing 3 cards. So if you play her, because, you know, you're going to be playing a lot of 4-drops. If you play her on turn 5 as the last card in your hand, you're then going to get some extra cards to play for turn 6. So in that situation, she's really good. But for just 4 stats, she is probably a little bit lackluster. She needs a bit of a stat buff. Maybe draws you 4 cards. She needs a little bit of help. I think she definitely deserves a buff. Dark Hawk up next. Dark Hawk is going to be one of the strongest cards in Zabu decks. You're going to build your whole deck around it. It's a pull 5 card, of course. I don't have it. But loads of synergy. Wong is also going to be in a Zabu deck. You've got Rock Slide. Korg is a solid option. Black Widow, rather. You could play on 2 before you get your Zabu. I think Darkhawk is absolutely insane. I really, really do think it's going to be an OP card. You can also Moon Gold to get another one of these. You can Mystique. I think the card's cracked. Dracula we're going to put in has potential. I doubt you're going to end up playing Dracula, but you could combo Dracula with Atuma, with Chavez, with Strong Guy. There's certainly a potential deck there with Dracula and Zabu, but it's not going to be a card that you're putting in many decks, that's for sure. Drax up next. Drax, I really feel like Drax deserves to be 9 points when you get the on reveal. When you get the on reveal with Drax, he plays for 8. So out of Shang-Chi range, little bit of synergy with Absorbing Man as well. You could Absorbing Man him. Wong, he has some nice synergy with. He's just a solid card that you can play on turn 6. So not too bad, but not great. Enchantress up next. I'm going to put Enchantress either into Broken Mate or popping up. I think she probably deserves to go up in the Broken Mate category. One downside of Enchantress is you don't want to play Enchantress and Super Scroll in the same deck, because you know, you don't want to cancel out your opponent's ongoing abilities if you're playing Super Scroll. And I do think Super Scroll is really, really, really good. But Enchantress is going to be great into your opponent's Zabus. The problem is a lot of your cards as well are also going to have ongoing abilities. And what your opponent should be doing is playing their ongoing cards into the same lane as your Zabu. So if you Enchantress, you get rid of your Zabu. However, you could just hold Enchantress until turn 6, because then you don't care about getting rid of your Zabu's ongoing ability. So she could go in the top of popping off. I don't think she's quite as good as these other cards, but I think she just deserves to go up here because of how strong Enchantress can be as a tech card. Again, Moon Girl going to be a card that we're going to talk about in a bit. You wouldn't really want two Enchantresses most likely, so that's maybe another downside. I could see an argument for putting her in popping off, but I think she probably just about deserves to go into the Broken Mate category. Ghost Rider up next. Ghost Rider, I'm going to put in Meh along Hell Cow. Like, these cards you can maybe do something with, but I think it's a real stretch. You could build like your whole deck around these cards. Again, you could play Dracula, you could play Strong Guy. Sounds really bad though to me. Dracula I think has more potential than these cards do, but they're not completely dead like some of these others. Jubilee up next. I'm going to put Jubilee into Meh. I think like a lot of your cards are just going to be 4-drops, so why not just play an actual 4-drop than a Jubilee, you know, that's just going to be hitting something random. If you're playing Chavez, there's maybe an argument that you could play her to try and thin your Chavez out. I just think it's Meh. I don't think you should really be playing Jubilee unless you're really lacking in options. Kazar is dead. Miles Morales is dead. Mr. Negative is dead. There's no way you want to ever play any of these cards with Zabu. Of course, Kazar benefiting off lots of 1-drops. You don't want to play any 1-drops, or very few maybe. Miles Morales, why would you play this? And Mr. Negative, similar. Maybe there's something you could do with Mr. Negative and Zabu. Maybe we could put it in has potential, but honestly, I don't see it. Like, why would you ever play this card? I don't really see why. All right, up next we have Moon Girl. Moon Girl is one the more I've thought about, the better she sounds. I think Moon Girl might be actually the goated card in these Zabu decks, because you can Moon Girl on turn 4 as well as play another card, and then you just double your whole hand. Because these 4-cost cards are going to be so cheap, you want to play so many of them, actually adding more to your hand is going to be really, really good. Similar to what Crystal's doing, except Crystal is shuffling your whole hand away and drawing you 3 cards, whereas Moon Girl is doubling your hand size. So you get 2 Spider-Mans that you can play on turn 5, for example. You get 2 Absorbing Mans. There's all sorts of really nice things you can do with Moon Girl. I think she's just going to be pretty much auto-include. I would be surprised if any Zabu deck ends up not playing her. The more I think about it, the better she sounds. I'm going to put Namor into the dead category as well. Slightly better than these cards because, you know, you could, in theory, get 10 stats for 4 with him. But realistically, because you're playing so many 4-drops, you're not going to want to have a lane where just Namor's on his own. And Atuma, while they have similar abilities, Atuma has synergy with Dracula and maybe Zero and Shuri, right? So Namor's just bad. Up next, we have Omega Red. I think we can put Omega Red into the has potential category. You could build your whole deck around this guy. I really doubt that it's going to be worth it, but maybe Omega Red buffing up your other locations if you're winning this location by plus 10 points. If you're playing like a Dark Hawk deck, you could maybe slam Omega Red in there. Maybe with your Crossbones, you can get really far ahead and a Shuri, and then you get Omega Red. I mean, if you can get the benefit of him, it's decent, but I'm going to put it in has potential because I'm not really convinced it's in the same league as Jessica Jones and Drax. Up next, we have Rockslide. Rockslide on its own is probably in the decent category, but when you consider the Darkhawk synergy, we have to put it in the popping off category. I'm not going to put it in broken on its own. Like the Darkhawk, Absorbing Man, Wong synergy is absolutely nuts, but that's really Darkhawk that's making that so nuts, right? So we'll put Rockslide in the popping off category. I think it's a serious consideration for a lot of your decks. Maybe we could put it in here because I think Drax and Jessica Jones are probably better than your average deck. But in a Darkhawk deck, it's absolutely up here, but maybe we should just put it in the decent category on its own, like for your average deck. If you're playing Darkhawk, you're going to play Rockslide. If you're not playing Darkhawk, Rockslide is a serious consideration. If there's lots of Zabu mirrors, giving your opponent a rock as their final draw could be pretty impactful. So I think we'll put Rockslide into the decent category, but bear in mind if you're playing Darkhawk, it's absolutely cracked. Next we have Sandman, dead on arrival. However, Sandman is the ultimate counter to Zabu. I'm definitely going to be building some Sandman decks, so make sure you subscribe to see the counter Zabu decks. Of course, it can be Enchantress, but you can place Sandman into the same location your opponent plays Zabu, and then it's going to be more difficult for your opponent to get it. Also, if your opponent tries to Super Scroll, yeah, maybe not. But still, Sandman's just sick. Really, really good card against Zabu. I love the card in general. So yeah. Up next we have Sentry. I'm going to put Sentry into the mech category. You could maybe say like it has potential because you could intentionally fill up your right location. But I think it's just pretty meh. You're not going to want to play Viper in this deck. You're not really going to want to play Cosmo. Although Cosmo is the best way of protecting Zabu. So maybe we can put Sentry into has potential. I think it's just meh. I just think it's meh. It's probably just not worth it. If you're not wanting to play Viper, I don't see how Sentry is ever worth it. And I don't see why you would ever want to play Viper in a Zabu deck. Up next we have Shuri. Shuri is an interesting one. It has big synergy with Wong. So definitely in the popping off. I think we just put it in popping off. It's not broken in my opinion. You can do Absorbing Man Shuri, which is pretty bad, right? Because you would get your first Shuri just buffing Absorbing Man. So that's not a very good combo. Shuri with Wong is nuts. But it's honestly not as good as you might think because there's not that many 4-drops with high base power. Atuma and Crossbones being the main two. So Shuri into Crossbones, your Shuri would play for 10 stats for 4, which is really good. But then you've got a 16-point crossbow, which is getting Shang-Chi'd most likely, you know. So we're putting popping off. It is absolutely nuts with Wong though, so you could maybe bump it up a little bit. But yeah, I think Shuri just goes into popping off. She's a good mid-range card to include in your average deck, and with Wong she becomes even better. Next we have Spider-Man. Spider-Man is definitely, I think maybe Enchantress should come down. Nah, we'll put her. Spider-Man's insane. Spider-Man is absolutely insane in these decks. You can get 2 Spider-Mans with Moon Girl, web up 2 of your opponent's 3 locations. You can also, if you have Quinjet and with the Moon Girl, you can go Spider-Man, Absorbing Man, because one of these Spider-Mans is just going to cost 1 because you Moon Gold it and you have a Quinjet on board. So there's the potential to web up 3 locations on turn 5. Of course, one problem with Spider-Man is that he's not getting you those 8-cube victories. You're only getting 4 cubes max because people just forfeit against Spider-Man. The potential is just too high not to put it in broken, mate. It's absolutely insane. Stronger up next. Stronger has potential. Again, with Dracula, with maybe some discard cards, you can get Stronger up to 10 stats. Maybe we could even just put it in the decent category because if you just build your deck properly, like honestly, it could go up here as well. It can get Enchantress. I'm going to put it right at the top of has potential because you really just need to test out the Strong Guy builds to see how they're going to work. It's very difficult before the release to evaluate how good this card's going to be. I think it's right at the top of has potential. I can definitely see a lot of decks going down the Strong Guy route, but you're going to have to be building your deck very, very carefully. And with Moon Girl, things could maybe get a little bit awkward. And next we have Super Scroll. Super Scroll, I'm not going to put it in, it could go up here. I'm going to put it into the popping off category. I think it's just going to be a really, really good option. If your opponent has a Zabu, you can play Super Scroll and suddenly your 4-cost cards cost 1. That's insane. If your opponent's got Dark Hawk, you get the Dark Hawk benefits. If your opponent has a Wong, you get the Wong benefits. It does seem really, really nuts, to be completely honest. It's the first deck where Super Scroll really does make sense to be including. You're not going to want to play Enchantress and Super Scroll in the same deck, and I do think it's a pretty big disadvantage not to be able to have Enchantress. So that's why it's probably only in popping off and not in the broken category, because you do lose the Enchantress, so maybe it's not the greatest. Next we have Thing. Thing can just go into the mech category. It's like a whatever card, kind of similar with Jubilee. You're just never really going to play it, but it's not as bad as these other options. Typhoid Mary. Typhoid Mary, we'll put in the has potential category for the same reason as Atuma. You could eat it with Dracula, perhaps. You could zero with it. I don't think you're going to be wanting to play zero in these decks, but the option is there, so it has some potential. Warpath, I think, is super meh. I'm not going to quite put it in dead, but it's like, honestly, maybe Warpath is just dead with Namor. I just don't see you playing it in this deck. You're going to have to leave a location empty. I don't really see why you would want to do that. Similar with Namor, you don't want to just have one card in a location when you have so many cheap cards to play. Finally, White Queen and Wong. White Queen we're putting into the popping off category. It's just really good, to be honest. Like, in Mirrors, you're getting a 4-cost card from your opponent, which is only going to cost you 2. Against other players, you get that information to see if they've got a leader or something like that, and then you can maybe on turn 5 go for the Spider-Man route or something, and try and just block them completely from playing. Information is good. It gives you an extra card in hand, which I think is nice because you're playing so many cheap cards. Yeah, I think it's just a really, really solid option in pretty much every single deck that you're playing with Zabu. Finally, Wong. Wong is a very interesting one. I think we have to put it into the broken category, to be honest, because it has big synergy with Shuri. It has decent synergy with cards like Drax, JJ, and Rescue. It has insane synergy with Rockside Darkhawk. It doesn't currently have good synergy with Absorbing Man, but I would imagine that does get fixed. You could even go Jubilee if you're playing Wong, and then Jubilee suddenly a little bit better. So we could maybe bump Jubilee up to has potential, I think. Like, there's maybe something you could do with her. So yeah, this is my tier list. Overall, the best cards: Moon Girl, Spider-Man, Shang-Chi. That you can, Enchantress, you can include in basically any deck. Absorbing Man, if you've got him, you can probably include in any deck. Wong and Darkhawk, you can just pair together in a very, very strong deck. A lot of the popping off cards you can pretty much just include in any version. The decent cards are also just solid options to include in any version. Rockside definitely being worse than the other two, I would say. But of course, Rockside just insane with Wong and Darkhawk. And then the has potential ones are the ones that are most likely not going to be in any of your decks, but are things that you could consider. The mech category is like whatever, and then the dead category is never, ever, ever. That's my tier list. Is there anything that you would disagree with? Let me know in the comments below. If you haven't already done so, make sure you subscribe. Thanks for watching this far. And I'm also going to be posting some of the best decks with Zabu, so make sure you look out for those. Thanks for watching, and see you on the next video.